I found out my college fund was spent the same week I got accepted into my dream university. Not because my mom told me, not because there was some tragic emergency, but because the financial aid office politely asked why I hadn't paid my tuition deposit. That was the moment I realized the biggest family betrayal of my life had already happened, and I was the last person to know. I grew up believing I was lucky. Single mom, small house in Ohio, tight budget but stable. She worked 2 jobs when I was little, waitressing at night, office assistant during the day. Every birthday card I ever got from her said the same thing, for your future. She loved saying that. When relatives asked about my plans, she'd smile proudly and say, her college fund is taken care of. I made sure of it. I believed her, completely. From the time I was 10, she showed me the statements once a year, a savings account in my name. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough for state tuition. Enough to start without drowning in loans. It felt safe. It felt responsible. It felt like proof that even if we weren't rich, my future mattered. I worked hard in high school. Advanced classes, debate club, part-time job at a coffee shop. I didn't touch the savings because I didn't need to. My mom would sometimes say things like, "You don't need to stress about money. I handled it." Handled it. Those words replay in my head now, because the truth? There was no safety. There was no handling it. There was only a slow, quiet finance drama unfolding behind my back. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't dramatic. It was small. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I cried. She cried too. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "All that sacrifice paid off." I thought she meant the years she worked overtime. Now I realize she might have meant something else. That night, I asked casually, "When should we transfer the tuition deposit from my account?" She froze. Not for long, just a second, but long enough. "Oh, I'll handle it," she said quickly. "Don't worry about that." There it was again. Don't worry. I wanted to trust her. I had always trusted her, even when she could be controlling, even when she read my messages for safety, even when she reminded me that everything I had was because of her. I brushed off the unease, because questioning your own mother feels wrong, especially when she spent your whole life reminding you she's all you have. The email from the university came 5 days later. "Reminder, your tuition deposit is overdue." I remember staring at the screen, confused, embarrassed. My first thought wasn't that my college fund was spent. My first thought was that there must be a mistake. It never crossed my mind that my own mother, the woman who built my future in every birthday card, could be the source of this family betrayal. But that was the beginning of a slow burn finance drama that would change how I see money, how I see trust, and how I see my own mother, the toxic parent I didn't realize I had. And at that moment, I still had no idea how deep it went. I didn't confront her right away. I wish I could say I did. I wish I could say I was brave. But when the financial aid email came, I walked into the kitchen holding my phone like it was something fragile. "Hey," I said lightly, "they're saying the tuition deposit is overdue." She didn't look up from the sink. "That's weird," she replied. Calm, too calm. "I'll call them tomorrow." That should have reassured me. Instead, something tightened in my chest. The next day came and went. No call. The email reminder came again, slightly more urgent this time. I asked her again that evening. "Oh my God, can you relax?" she snapped. "Do you think I would jeopardize your future? I told you I'll handle it." There it was, the shift. Suddenly, I wasn't the responsible daughter asking about her own education. I was the ungrateful child questioning her mother. That was the first time I felt like maybe this wasn't just a mistake. Maybe this was something else, something uglier. 3 days later, I logged into the savings account myself, or at least I tried. The password didn't work. That was strange. I had used the same one for years. I texted her casually, "Hey, did you change the login for the college account?" No response. An hour later, she came into my room without knocking. "Why are you snooping around?" "I'm not snooping. It's my account." "It's my money," she corrected. "I put it there." That sentence hit differently. For years, it was your future. Now it was my money. I felt my stomach drop. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment in my head. The freeze when I mentioned transferring the deposit, the defensiveness, the password change. I started Googling things I never thought I'd search. What happens if a college fund is spent? Can a parent legally take money from a child's account? Signs of financial manipulation by a parent. The results were filled with stories of family betrayal, parents draining savings, borrowing temporarily, never paying it back. It felt dramatic. It felt extreme. It couldn't be my life. The next morning, I called the bank directly. After verifying my identity, the representative hesitated. "There have been multiple withdrawals over the past year," she said carefully. My heart pounded in my ears. "How much is left?" I whispered. Silence. "Ma'am, the account balance is $312.74. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. That account had nearly $38,000 last year. $38,000! Years of birthdays, years of sacrifice, years of believing I was safe. Gone. My college fund was spent. Not recently, not by accident. Over time. Quietly. When I confronted her that evening, she didn't deny it. She didn't apologize either. "I needed it," she said flatly. "For what?" "Bills, debt, life. You think raising you was free?" I stared at her. "You told me it was protected." "And it was," she snapped, "until I had no choice." No choice. The phrase echoed. But there had been choices. Credit cards, loans, conversations, honesty. Instead, there was secrecy, gaslighting, and a slow-burn finance drama that I had unknowingly been starring in. "You were going to tell me, right?" I asked. She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. It's not like I gambled it away. I'm your mother." As if that erased everything. As if being my mother made the family betrayal disappear. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not explosive anger, not screaming, just clarity. I wasn't dealing with a struggling parent. I was dealing with a toxic parent who believed my future was hers to use. And suddenly, the tuition deadline wasn't the only thing counting down. So was my trust.
After that conversation, the house felt different. Same walls, same kitchen table, same framed photo of us at my 8th grade graduation. But everything felt staged, like I was living inside a lie. She acted normal. That was the worst part. She made dinner, asked about my day, talked about a sale at Target, as if my college fund was spent was just a minor inconvenience, as if this wasn't the biggest family betrayal of my life. I kept waiting for remorse, for panic, for even a flicker of guilt. It never came. 2 days later, she called me into the living room. "I've been thinking," she said carefully. "Maybe this is a blessing in disguise." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "Maybe you don't need to go away for school. Community college is cheaper. You could stay home, help out." Help out. The words hit harder than the missing money. This wasn't just about debt. This was control. If my college fund was spent, then my independence was delayed, maybe indefinitely. "You always said you wanted me to have better opportunities than you," I said quietly. "I did, but plans change." Plans change. No, trust changes. Respect changes. Love changes. That night, I went through old files in her office drawer. I wasn't snooping anymore. I was surviving. I found bank statements, credit card bills, vacation receipts, a weekend spa retreat from 6 months ago, 2 designer handbags. None of this looked like emergency medical debt. None of this looked like survival. This looked like a slow, selfish decision. This looked like a finance drama she created and expected me to pay for. My hands shook. Not from anger, from realization. The withdrawals hadn't been for groceries. They hadn't been for rent. They had been for lifestyle, comfort, image, and maybe something worse, resentment. The final piece came when I overheard her on the phone. I wasn't trying to listen, but her bedroom door was cracked. "She's overreacting," she said. "It was my money anyway. Kids these days think everything belongs to them." Pause. I mean, what was she going to do? Leave? My stomach dropped. Leave? So that was it. The unspoken fear. If I went away for school, she'd be alone. If I became independent, she'd lose control. If my college fund was spent, I would need her longer. It wasn't just financial, it was emotional leverage. I stood there in the hallway, heart pounding. I felt like I was grieving. Not the money, her. The version of her I thought I had. The hard-working single mom who sacrificed everything. Instead, I saw a toxic parent who saw my future as negotiable, who saw my trust as expendable, who saw my education as something she could reshape to fit her comfort. The breaking point wasn't loud. There was no screaming match, no dramatic storming out. It was quiet, cold, clear. I walked back to my room and stared at my acceptance letter. The paper felt heavier than it had a week ago. I realized something devastating. The college fund was spent, but something else had been spent too. My innocence, my blind trust, my belief that blood automatically meant loyalty. This wasn't just a family betrayal. It was a choice, and if she could choose herself over my future, then I could choose myself too. I just didn't know yet how far I was willing to go. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I didn't cry in front of her again. That was the shift she didn't notice. Because when your college fund is spent, people expect you to explode. They expect tears, begging, drama. What they don't expect is silence. The next morning, I made breakfast like nothing had happened. I asked her if she wanted coffee. She looked almost relieved. See, she probably thought, she's over it. That's the thing about a toxic parent. They mistake emotional withdrawal for forgiveness. They confuse exhaustion with acceptance. But inside me, something had crystallized. I wasn't going to fight her. I was going to outgrow her. First, I called the university. I explained the situation, not dramatically, just factually. My college fund was spent without my knowledge, I said calmly. The advisor paused. Then she did something my mother never did. She listened. She walked me through emergency grant options, payment plans, work-study programs, scholarship reconsiderations. It wouldn't be easy. It would mean loans. It would mean working 2 jobs. It would mean independence the hard way. But it was possible, and possible was enough. Next, I opened a brand new bank account at a different bank in only my name. No shared access, no oversight, no emotional leverage disguised as protection. When the banker asked if I wanted a joint bank holder, I said no without hesitation. That single word felt powerful. For the first time, my money would be mine, not part of some hidden finance drama, not vulnerable to another quiet family betrayal. At home, I changed too. I stopped telling her my schedule, stopped sharing details about scholarship interviews, stopped seeking her approval. If she asked, I gave vague answers, still figuring it out, working on it, nothing new. She started to notice the distance. "You're being cold," she said one evening. "I'm busy," which wasn't a lie. I was busy rebuilding a future she had quietly dismantled. Meanwhile, something else unfolded. Her spending didn't stop. Amazon packages kept arriving. She mentioned a weekend trip with friends. I watched. I didn't comment. I didn't argue. But I documented. bank records I legally had access to from past statements, screenshots of withdrawal dates, dates that aligned perfectly with luxury purchases. If she ever tried to rewrite history, to turn this into some noble sacrifice, I would have facts, not emotions. Facts. One afternoon, she casually said, "You know, I've been thinking, maybe we should refinance the house, use some equity, help with tuition." It sounded generous, almost heroic, but I heard the subtext: control, shared debt, more entanglement. "No," I said gently, "I'll figure it out." Her smile tightened. "You don't have to prove anything." "I'm not. I just don't want to mix things financially." That word, financially, hung between us, because the truth was already clear. My college fund was spent, yes, but the real cost of this finance drama wasn't the $38,000. It was trust, and trust, once broken in a family betrayal, doesn't regenerate just because someone offers a new loan. The revenge wasn't flashy. There were no viral confrontations, no courtroom scenes, just quiet preparation. I secured housing near campus with 3 roommates. I accepted a work-study position. I signed loan papers without telling her. Every signature felt like cutting an invisible cord. She still believed I'd stay, that I'd come to my senses, that losing my college fund meant losing my independence. She underestimated something fundamental. You can spend someone's savings, you can manipulate a narrative, you can even justify a betrayal, but you can't control someone who has stopped needing your permission. And I was done asking. She just didn't know it yet.
The acceptance confirmation deadline was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to secure funding, 3 weeks to secure housing, 3 weeks to untangle myself from a woman who still believed I would fold. She didn't know I had already signed the enrollment forms. She didn't know I had confirmed my dorm waiver and locked in off-campus housing. She definitely didn't know I had taken screenshots of every transaction, proving my college fund was spent long before any emergency happened. Silence can be terrifying, but it can also be strategic. The more independent I became, the more she escalated, subtly. "You're stressed," she'd say. "You're not thinking clearly. Maybe you should defer a year." Defer. Delay. Depend. That was the pattern. A toxic parent doesn't always scream. Sometimes they soften their voice and frame control as concern. But I had stopped reacting emotionally. Instead, I gathered information. I scheduled a free consultation with a legal aid clinic, not to sue her, just to understand my rights. The attorney confirmed something important. If the account was under my name, even if she funded it, the withdrawals could be questioned, especially if there was intent to misrepresent. Intent. That word stayed with me, because this wasn't accidental overdraft chaos. This was a year-long, calculated decision, a quiet finance drama that relied on me staying uninformed. At home, she began playing the victim. "You know, I sacrificed everything for you," she told her sister on speakerphone one night. "Now she acts like I committed some crime." Crime. Interesting choice of word. I didn't interrupt. I let the silence speak for me. Because I had something she didn't expect. Evidence. Dates that lined up with spa weekends, transfers that matched luxury purchases, statements showing withdrawals months before any supposed hardship. The narrative she was building didn't match the timeline, and timelines don't lie. 2 weeks before the deposit deadline, I received confirmation. I had been awarded an emergency institutional grant. Not enough to replace what was gone, but enough to secure my spot. Enough to prove I didn't need her rescue. I printed the confirmation letter and folded it carefully. Not to show her. Not yet. This wasn't about rubbing it in. This was about timing. Revenge, if you can even call it that, isn't loud when it's smart. It's patient. The real shift happened when she tried one last tactic. "You know," she said one evening, If you stay home and work for a year, you can rebuild the savings. We can rebuild it together. We. The word felt manipulative now. The college fund was spent, but she was still speaking as if the future was a joint venture. I looked at her calmly. I already secured my funding, I said. Her face changed. What do you mean? I'm going. I move in 3 weeks. Silence filled the kitchen. Not the uncomfortable kind, the powerful kind. You're seriously going to take out loans because of this drama? She asked sharply. This drama, as if the family betrayal was mutual, as if I had participated. It's not drama, it's accountability. She laughed, but it sounded brittle. You're punishing me. No, I wasn't punishing her. I was removing access. Access to my finances, access to my decisions, access to the version of me that believed her without question. The real revenge wasn't exposing her publicly. It wasn't humiliating her. It was leaving, thriving, building a life she could no longer influence with money. Because when a college fund is spent by someone you trusted, the instinct is to fight. But sometimes the most devastating response to a family betrayal is success. And success was coming. She just didn't realize that once I walked out that door, I wouldn't be walking back. Not financially, not emotionally, not ever in the same way again. Moving day arrived quietly. No dramatic goodbye, no tearful apology, no last-minute confession about why my college fund was spent. She stood in the driveway with her arms crossed while my roommate's parents helped unload boxes. To anyone watching, we probably looked normal, but underneath that normalcy was the weight of a family betrayal neither of us was naming out loud. College was harder than I imagined. I worked mornings at the campus library, evenings at a cafe 2 blocks away. Weekends were for studying and catching up on sleep. There were nights I cried in the shower. Not because of the loans, not because my college fund was spent, but because I realized how alone I felt. Other girls called their moms for advice about roommates or exams. I hesitated every time I thought about dialing her number. Trust doesn't regenerate just because time passes. She texted me constantly during the first month. Are you eating? Did you pay your bill? You know you can always come home. Home. That word didn't feel the same anymore. I responded politely, briefly. No details about my job promotions, no mention of the scholarship I picked up second semester, no updates about the leadership position I earned in my department. Information is currency, and I had learned what happens when someone mismanages currency in a finance drama. Then something unexpected happened. 3 months into the semester, she called me late at night. Her voice was different, less sharp, less certain. I can't pay the credit cards, she admitted. I didn't react immediately. I just listened. Apparently, the spending hadn't stopped after my college fund was spent. Without the cushion of that money, her balances had ballooned. Interest piled up. Minimum payments weren't enough. You don't understand how hard it is alone, she said. There it was. Not apology. Not accountability, loneliness. For a split second, old instincts kicked in, the urge to fix it, to transfer money from my tiny savings, to become the responsible one again. But then I remembered the statements, the spa retreat, the handbags, the year-long silence. This wasn't a crisis created by me leaving. It was a pattern created long before, a pattern masked as sacrifice, a pattern rooted in control, the hallmark of a toxic parent who believes boundaries are betrayal. I can't help financially, I said gently. The line went quiet. You're just going to watch me drown? She asked. The irony almost made me laugh. I'm not watching you drown. I'm choosing to not drown with you. That was the first truly honest sentence between us in months. Over the next few weeks, the situation escalated. She mentioned refinancing again, selling the car, borrowing from relatives, the same relatives she once bragged to about my secured future. I didn't intervene. I didn't gloat. Karma doesn't need commentary. It unfolds on its own timeline. The real turning point came when my aunt called me, concerned. Apparently, my mom had told everyone I abandoned her after she helped me for years. The narrative was shifting again, painting me as ungrateful. That familiar family betrayal, but now public. Only this time, I was prepared. I calmly shared documentation with my aunt. Dates, withdrawals, proof that my college fund was spent long before any financial emergency. There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. "Oh," she said quietly. Just one word, but heavy. Truth has weight, and once it's placed on the table, it's hard to ignore. Within a month, the family tone changed. Less sympathy for her, more quiet understanding toward me. No dramatic confrontations, no public shaming, just subtle distance. The kind that happens when people realize the finance drama isn't what they were told. Karma doesn't always strike like lightning. Sometimes it erodes support slowly. And for someone who thrives on control and image, that erosion is devastating. For the first time, she was facing consequences she couldn't gaslight away, and I didn't have to lift a finger.
By the end of my first year, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Not in some movie montage way, but in small, steady victories. Dean's List, a paid internship, a savings account slowly growing, untouched, protected. Every dollar I earned felt sacred, because I knew what it felt like when a college fund was spent without your consent. I knew how fragile financial trust could be, and I refused to repeat that pattern. Meanwhile, the cracks in her world widened. My aunt stopped lending her money. My uncle declined to co-sign a consolidation loan. Family gatherings became quieter, more careful. When I came home for Thanksgiving, the energy was different. No one mentioned the finance drama directly, but people asked me about school, about my internship, about my plans. They didn't look at her for confirmation anymore. That subtle shift, it was everything. The real karma moment came unexpectedly. I received a letter from the bank, forwarded to my dorm. It was addressed to her, but had been misrouted because of our shared last name and old account ties. Collections, final notice, legal review pending. For a second, my chest tightened. Old guilt flared. But then I remembered something important. When my college fund was spent, there had been no warning, no conversation, no transparency, just action. This wasn't my consequence to carry. She called me 2 days later. Her tone wasn't angry this time. It was small. "They might put a lien on the house," she admitted. The same house she once suggested refinancing together. The same house she implied I owed loyalty to. I listened quietly. Not cold, not cruel, just detached. "I'm sorry you're going through that," I said, honestly, because I was. Despite everything, I didn't want her ruined. I just wanted distance. "You could help," she whispered. There it was again, the expectation, the belief that my success should circle back and patch her choices. A toxic parent doesn't always demand. Sometimes they imply obligation. But I had learned something powerful this year. Boundaries are not betrayal. Silence is not cruelty. And refusing to finance someone else's poor decisions is not revenge. It's self-preservation. "I can't," I said softly. Another pause. This one longer, heavier. And then something surprising happened. She didn't argue. She didn't guilt trip. She just sighed. "I guess I have to figure this out myself." "Yes, you do." Over the next few months, she downsized, sold the car, took a second job, made payment plans. The lifestyle that had quietly drained my savings disappeared, not because I exposed her publicly, not because I fought her in court, but because reality caught up. Karma isn't dramatic when it's real. It's administrative. It's interest rates. It's declined cosigners. It's people finally seeing the full picture of a family betrayal instead of a curated version.
The last time we spoke about the money directly, she said something I never expected. "I shouldn't have touched it without telling you." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first crack in the armor, the first acknowledgement that my college fund was spent wasn't just life happening. It was a choice, and choices have consequences. I didn't celebrate, I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, because the true payoff wasn't watching her struggle, it was realizing I didn't need her approval anymore. The finance drama that once defined my future had become a lesson. And the biggest revenge of all, I built a life she couldn't control. And I did it without becoming bitter. That's a different kind of victory. It's been 4 years now. I graduated with honors. Yes, I have student loans. Yes, I worked harder than I ever imagined. But every achievement is mine, not tied to someone else's control, not built on silent conditions. Sometimes people ask if I resent her, if I'm still angry that my college fund was spent. The honest answer? I was, for a long time. Because when a family betrayal comes from the person you raised you, it doesn't just break trust, it reshapes your identity. You start questioning your instincts, your loyalty, your definition of love. For months after I moved out, I kept expecting another crisis, another twist in the finance drama, another moment where she'd try to pull me back with guilt or fear. But something unexpected happened instead. Distance created clarity. I started therapy during my sophomore year, not because I hated her, but because I didn't want to repeat the cycle. A toxic parent teaches you subtle things, that love must be earned, that sacrifice is leverage, that money equals power. I had to unlearn all of that, slowly, patiently. Our relationship now is different, polite, careful, boundaried. We meet for coffee occasionally when I'm back in town. We talk about safe topics, weather, work, extended family. We don't revisit that my college fund was spent, not because it doesn't matter, but because it already did its damage and its lesson. She no longer has access to my finances, or my decisions, or my emotional stability. And surprisingly, that has made things calmer. Not warmer, but calmer. The strangest part, I don't see her as a villain anymore. I see her as a flawed person who made a selfish decision out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of losing relevance, fear of not being needed. None of those fears justified the family betrayal, but understanding them freed me from carrying rage. Because revenge isn't about destruction, it's about liberation. When I look back, the day I found out my college fund was spent felt like the worst moment of my life. Now I see it differently. It was the day I stopped outsourcing responsibility for my future. It was the day I learned financial independence isn't just about money. It's about boundaries. It's about transparency. It's never allowing yourself to be financially entangled with someone who weaponizes support. The finance drama didn't ruin me, it refined me. If you're listening to this and something feels off in your own situation, trust that feeling. Ask questions, check statements, have uncomfortable conversations, because loyalty without accountability isn't love, and being someone's child doesn't mean being someone's safety net, especially if that safety net was built using your own savings. I don't wish her harm, I don't wish her failure, but I no longer sacrifice my peace to protect her image. That's the real growth. That's the real ending. So I'll leave you with this. If you found out tomorrow that your college fund was spent, if you realized the biggest family betrayal in your life came from someone you trusted completely, would you explode? Or would you quietly build something stronger than what they tried to take? What would you have done if you were in my place?